go ahead and get started. Tell me when we're ready.
Go ahead.
All right, well, thank you for joining us today on June 3rd, 2020. And today we're looking at a land use application Z0004-20-CP. I'd like to call the meeting to order for the public hearing. And before we begin, I'd like to invite you to join me in a pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the
the United States of America, and to the republic
for which it stands,
one nation
under God,
indivisible,
indivisible,
liberty and justice for all.
for all.
Thank you. That was terrible.
Well, that's okay. We said it. Our hearts were in it.
All right. Now is the time that has been set to consider an application by Allied Homes and Development for a 6.43 acre expansion in the city of Sandy's urban growth boundary. The hearing today will proceed as follows. We'll first hear a staff presentation from Senior Planner Glenn Hamburg. The applicant will then have 15 minutes to present. Next, I will open a hearing for public testimony, beginning with public officials who will have 5 minutes each, then a presentation from the recognized community planning organization and agencies will have 3 minutes each. Finally, other people wishing to testify will have 3 minutes each. The board will then deliberate and either render a decision today or set a time to make a decision at a later date. With that, assisting us today is Clerk Mary Rathke, Senior Planner Glenn Hamburg, Assistant County Counsel Nate Boderman, assisting us with our broadcast, webcast, are Garrett Teague, Rich Marvin, and Kevin Galusha. Today, we are holding our land use hearing virtually. If you've joined us on Zoom app for this meeting and you are interested in providing public comment, we'll prompt you regarding how to do that when the time is right. The Zoom link and instructions to participate via Zoom are located at clackamas.us/meeting/BCC/land use. You'll have an option of providing your comments to us live during the public comment portion of the meeting. Be sure to include your name and the area where you live. We'll now begin with a hearing with a legal statement by Nate Boderman, followed by a planning staff presentation for their report and recommendations. So Nate.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Now's the time set for the public hearing for the previously identified application. We have set this hearing up as a quasi-judicial land use hearing, which really means two important things for those that are participating here today. First, all of the criteria that can be used in reaching a decision have been identified in the staff report. Testimony, arguments, and evidence must be directed towards the criteria identified in the staff report or other relevant criteria found in the comprehensive plan or other land use regulation that person believes applies to the decision. Accordingly, please direct your testimony to a relevant approval criterion. Second, failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the decision maker and parties an opportunity to respond to the issue may preclude appeal to the Oregon Land Use Board of Appeals on that particular issue. Failure of the applicant to raise constitutional or other issues relating to proposed conditions of approval with sufficient specificity to allow the local government or its designee to respond to that issue precludes an action for damages in circuit court. Once final, these decisions may be appealed to the Oregon Land Use Board of Appeals. So at this time, I'll ask the Board of Commissioners to disclose any ex parte contacts, bias, or conflicts of interest that you might have in connection with this application.
No.
None.
Okay. Seeing none, hearing none, If anybody participating today wishes to challenge the impartiality of any particular commissioner, please clarify or clearly indicate your intent to do so in any written or oral testimony that you may provide. So that's it for me. I will pass it off to Glenn Hamburg with planning.
Good morning, everybody. Glenn Hamburg. I'm going to switch to a screen sharing right now. So just give me a moment. Great. I hope that you all can see the screen just fine right now.
Better if you did just the view. Single slide.
Are you all able to see this particular slide?
Yes.
Great. Okay. Well, I'll just jump right in. As the chair noted, the file for this land use application is Z0004-20-CP. It's an application to amend the county's comprehensive plan, specifically maps inside the comprehensive plan, to show an expansion of the City of Sandy's urban growth boundary. The expansion area is about 6.42 or 6.43 acres, somewhere in between, depending on how it's surveyed. The applicant is Allied Homes and Development. The owners of the property are Lawrence Poland, Richard Poland, and Shireen Lynette Tanag. And then there's also a portion of state highway that is owned and controlled by ODOT. The property doesn't have a situs address, but I'll show you where it is on a map. The property is right now in the county's jurisdiction, and it's zoned exclusive farm use, EFU. This application itself would not change any zoning or even bring in any property into the City of Sandy. As I'll explain, the application would simply make the area that we discussed eligible for incorporation and rezoning by the City of Sandy. As the chair noted, my name is Glenn Hamburg, and I'm a senior planner with Planning and Zoning. We originally scheduled this hearing for May 6th, about a month ago, but at the applicant's request, we continued the hearing to today. This morning, I'm going to be relatively brief. Here's an outline of what I'll discuss. I will share what the application really is for and the need for particular public facilities for the City of Sandy. I'll show how the area that's proposed for incorporation into the city's urban growth boundary is an area that has already been determined and prioritized for future urban development. It's in what's called an urban reserve area. We'll take a look at some of the more substantive approval criteria that are on the books for expanding an urban growth boundary, and I'll show you how those criteria are satisfied by this application. I'll highlight one significant issue that there was at a planning commission hearing on this application back at the beginning of March. And finally, I will address the staff and planning commission recommendation for approval of this application with 3 specific conditions. This is a map of the City of Sandy's transportation system plan. This is their adopted plan for future roads to serve the community.
Glenn, we don't see the map.
Can you see the map now?
No, your slide has not moved. There you go. Public facility.
Can you see this map still?
Well,
But can we have people mute because there's background noise going on?
I think that's Mary, maybe. I see the application summary, but
okay, we're just going to leave it here because I think that you can see the map on this screen.
yeah.
Great. Okay, so it might be a little bit smaller in your view here, so I apologize. But this is a map of the City of Sandy's transportation system plan. And right here, there's a blue line. this is a planned minor arterial. It's Gunderson Road. And as you'll be able to see better in some maps to follow, the minor arterial that is not yet constructed but planned for would connect to Highway 211 down here. We're going to jump to another map that shows this area outlined in closer detail. That blue line that we saw on the previous map is now pink here. It's Gunderson Road as planned for in the City of Sandy's Transportation System Plan. And here is where it would connect with Highway 211. As I said, the road connections in the TSP, and it's also something that's particularly recommended by the local fire district, by the city itself, and by local residents, because it would allow for a connection to the highway for residents, existing residents of this portion of the community and future residential development down here, meaning that they wouldn't have to drive and pass through residential neighborhoods just to get to the highway around the long side, but could go directly here. So this road connection that's planned for would serve existing and future development. However, this connection, which is shown in the TSP on just a concept level, is problematic in its actual location. It's problematic because of site distances and some of the topography that's there, and that would be needed to construct the connection. So people have looked at where is a more suitable location for this particular connection to the highway. And they found that it would actually be here. However, this location is outside of the City of Sandy's urban growth boundary. The urban growth boundary is today this boundary here. It includes all the area that's crosshatched. So the preferred location for the highway connection is outside of the existing urban growth boundary, and a necessary stormwater facility that would serve the road extension would also be outside of the urban growth boundary, as it is today. Now, the city has also expressed a need for a park in some general area of this side of the city. There are parks already that are over here and over here, but as residential development increases, as planned for in the City of Sandy here, there's going to be a need for more parks. And the city doesn't want people having to cross the highway, for example, to get to a park. And maybe the existing parks here are insufficient. So there's a general interest in having a park in this portion of the town. And so the city has thought about, and the applicant has thought about, using this space between the road extension and the existing urban growth boundary for that park. If there wasn't a park there, it would essentially be a donut hole and would be unused space. So maybe it's a good opportunity to meet that demonstrated park need by having the park there. Here's an aerial image of the same location. North is towards the top. The orange boundary shows the existing urban growth boundary. And then Gunderson Road as planned for in the transportation system plan. Here is Highway 211 where it would connect with. And there is future residential development planned for here and down here. Now, engineers, again, have suggested that the road connection actually be shaped something like this to connect to the highway, and that stormwater facility that is necessary to serve this road connection would be located down here at a lower elevation point. And this would be where that park would sit. Here's a specific map of the UGB expansion area. It includes about 1 acre for the road right-of-way connection, about 2/3 of an acre for the stormwater facility, about nearly 2.5 acres for a park. And then it would also include about 2.5 acres of the existing section of Highway 211 that would be widened, and there would be some construction easements along the side. And so the expansion area, the area proposed for inclusion in the city of Sandy's urban growth boundary, would be all of this area. It's a total about 6.42 or 6.43 acres. Now, the reason why the UGB needs to be expanded to include these areas is that these necessary public facilities cannot be built in the present jurisdiction of Clackamas County under its EFU zoning. Urban facilities, public facilities for urban uses like for residential development, et cetera, cannot be built on farmland. So the property would need to be rezoned. But in order for that to happen, the property first has to be brought into the city of Sandy, and the city of Sandy could rezone it. But in order for it to be brought into the city of Sandy, it first has to be in the city's urban growth boundary. So the proposal is to first just expand the urban growth boundary to include these spaces. And then once it's in the urban growth boundary, the city could potentially annex the property and rezone it. Now, the city has shared that if and when they were to actually annex this property following the UGB expansion, they would rezone that parkland, that green space, to parks and open space. The remainder of the expansion area would be zoned residential, but it's important to note that none of the expansion area is proposed for actual housing development. They would rezone the remainder of the expansion area residential only because the city of Sandy doesn't have a zoning designation that is just for public facilities like roads and stormwater facilities, and the adjacent zoning is already residential. So they're just proposing to apply the same zoning designation later on to everything but the park. But to be clear, they're not proposing for any of this expansion area to be used for housing. It would only be for those needs that are identified by the applicant in the city. I mentioned at the outset that this area is in something called an urban reserve. And here is a map of what are the city of Sandy's current urban reserve boundaries here on the outside. Everything inside of this area has already been identified as areas that are appropriate for future urbanization. And if you can see down here in yellow and highlighted red is the proposed expansion area in the city of Sandy up here. This is Highway 211. One other element to note is that the subject area is near to the historic Barlow Road. This is one of the sections, the final westernmost sections of the Oregon Trail. Under Clackamas County's jurisdiction, this segment is what's called a third priority segment, meaning it's one of the lower priorities in terms of preservation, partly because there hasn't been any evidence of the ruts of the trail being there that somebody could see, and the protection measures that are there for it are some of the most minimal. But if the application were to be approved, it wouldn't necessarily change all of that. It would simply, again, make the property eligible for annexation by the city and rezoning. If the city were to, after this application were to be approved, proceed with annexing the property and rezoning it, the city themselves would be responsible for evaluating what would be appropriate protection measures for any historical ruts that are out there as they see necessary. However, I should note that while there aren't any identified ruts in this space right now, the applicant's plans for the public facilities and what very rudimentary maps we have of where that road might be don't necessarily seem to conflict. For example, where they propose to put the stormwater facilities does not appear to be near where we think the historic road is or was. Same with the park. It doesn't appear that where they propose to put the park would be on top of any historic ruts. Just the road connection itself may cross a piece of the historic Barlow Trail. But again, we don't have any evidence of where exactly it is on the subject property, and we don't see any ruts out there right now. And ultimately, it would be up to the city of Sandy upon annexation and rezoning to consider how that space should be protected. We have reviewed the application against the approval criteria. There are approval criteria in statewide planning goals, and we find that the application satisfies all those criteria. One important thing to point out is the goal 10 for housing. There has not been a housing needs analysis done, which normally is something that you have to do if you're proposing to expand an urban growth boundary to include residential land. And literally they are doing that. They're proposing to expand the urban growth boundary and then to at least rezone some of that area residential, as I mentioned before. But they're not proposing the space to be used for housing, just for public facilities. They just don't have another zone that they can apply. So some proposed conditions of approval would, as I'll address here at the end, would help to guarantee that despite any residential zoning that's applied to the expansion area, it's not to be used for housing, because they've not done the necessary housing needs analysis to show that it's appropriate to expand into farmland to build more housing. I want to focus, though, on approval criteria in these organ administrative rules. And staff, again, finds that the application satisfies the requirements of these rules. For example, the proposal to expand the city's urban growth boundary was duly initiated by the city themselves. So they scheduled public hearings themselves. They had multiple public hearings on this proposal at the city of Sandy. And the city of Sandy City Council has already voted to approve the application. But the county has to do the same. And so that's why we're here today. The application has also appropriately addressed a need to expand the urban growth boundary. You can't just expand the urban growth boundary because you want to. You have to show that it's necessary. And staff finds that they have done that. They have shown that there's a need for this road connection. Indeed, they show that there was a need for this road connection years ago in adopting their transportation system plan. And that's been recently supported by the city and by traffic engineers and the local fire district, as well as local residents. The rules require that there be an inventory to show that there really is a deficiency in the existing urban growth boundary. Well, we've already shown that. We've shown that the existing urban growth boundary would not allow for the safest connection to the highway. Therefore, it needs to be expanded. And you couldn't expand the urban growth boundary in any other location of the city. We need it specifically at that spot to provide that road connection. Finally, there's some criteria in the county's comprehensive plan that must be reviewed for this application. The application doesn't propose any changes to how citizens are involved in the planning process. So it's consistent with the citizen involvement chapter of the comprehensive plan. And the application has been noticed according to the code criteria that the county has. And the county code requires that the urban growth boundary not be expanded into something called a rural reserve, which is sort of the opposite of an urban reserve. This area is not in any rural reserves. So the county's comprehensive plan allows for this urban growth boundary expansion where it is. Various parties have been invited to comment on this application. ODOT has commented. In fact, they have signed as one of the property owners supporting this urban growth boundary expansion. So when the Planning Commission met in March to discuss this application, I think it might be fair to say that their primary concern was just any impacts that there might be to the Barlow Road that's there on the property. So they talked about how construction staging activities might impact any evidence of the road that's there. They looked at how excavation activities for the stormwater facility might impact it, and opportunities to preserve any evidence of the historic road that there are at the park. And I've said now a few times that if this space were to be annexed and rezoned by the city, the county wouldn't really have any involvement in how that space is regulated and how any historic features are protected. However, the Planning Commission has recommended, and the applicant has agreed to, specific conditions that would nonetheless be enforced as a condition of any approval of this application. And I'll mention those. So the Planning Commission's 3 recommended conditions, if the board were to approve this, are as follows. Firstly, that the expansion include only the areas that are proposed by the applicant, nowhere else, and that all of the county's comprehensive plan maps are updated to show this expansion area. 2, that the expansion area only be used for the proposed public facilities. So despite the residential zoning that may be applied by the city to the area in the future, the area cannot be used for housing. More specifically, the area cannot be used for housing until the city does the necessary and legally required housing needs analysis to show that this area would be necessary for housing sometime in the future. And then finally, it's recommended that there be conditions that could help to minimize impacts to the Barlow Road historic corridor. So for example, that the location of construction staging activities take into account the need to preserve any evidence of the road that they find along the way. Same with the excavation of the stormwater facility. And the recommended conditions would require that any visible evidence of the road that they may find in doing the construction in the parkland area be preserved. That's the application in summary. I'm happy to answer any questions or to just turn it off to the applicant and go from there.
Any questions? I can't see any hands, so. Okay. We'll go ahead and open the public testimony. Let me see. Open the public comment portion of the hearing, and we will first hear from the applicant, given up to 15 minutes. And all right, go ahead, applicant. Applicant, you might have your mic. Okay, there you go.
Can you hear us now?
Yep.
Okay, great. Good morning, and thank you, Chair Bernard and fellow commissioners. My name is Chris Goodell. I'm with AKS Engineering. Our address is 12965 Southwest Herman Road, Suite 100, Tualatin, Oregon 97062. We prepared the application that's before you here today, and we're working with for the property owner and applicant, and I'm here with other members of the project team, including Rand Waltz and Mike Robinson. Wanted to thank staff for the positive recommendation and working with us on this application throughout this process. It's taken a long time, and it's been extended partially because of the pandemic with the coronavirus. So we do appreciate all the help. A few things I wanted to add. We concur with the staff report and then the summary that Glenn provided here this morning. I'm not going to repeat all that. We agree with it all. And it's all in our application and in his staff report. So I just had a few things that we did want to mention, that the 3 hearing bodies that have heard this specific application have all approved the application or recommended approval, including the County Planning Commission. And the city has approved the subdivision for single family homes. DLCD, Department of Land Conservation and Development, and ODOT, Oregon Department of Transportation, they do not oppose the application. As Glenn mentioned, that this property, this area, is included in the city's acknowledged urban reserve area, which is included for first consideration and priority into the UGB. And then I guess finally, the UGB amendment application is the applicant's voluntary way of giving the city of Sandy and the neighbors there what they want, which is a second road to the property that's in the city and designated for residential development, because the road connection on the city's TSP cannot be constructed, and a larger park area with a sidewalk along the park on future Gunderson Road that's larger than what the city could be obtained otherwise. We believe the application before you, including our materials, the staff report, and the presentation here today, supports approval of the application. We hope you'll approve the application here this morning, subject to the recommendation, including the conditions of approval that Glenn went over. We concur with those. And as I mentioned here, I'm here with other project team members, and we'd be happy to answer any questions that you have. Would appreciate it if you ask those questions before you close the hearing so we could provide response. Thank you very much.
Any questions of the applicant? Don't see any. So we'll go ahead and open the public hearing for those who wish to testify. Is there anyone who wishes to testify? Is somebody looking at that?
Yes, we have one person, Jan Lee.
Okay. Bring her in, and she has 3 minutes. Jan?
Hello, commissioners. It's just spent last week with you working on the budget, and we're back here again. I'm Jan Lee from 36702 Ichabod Street in Sandy and a member of the Sandy City Council. On behalf of the city, we thank you for holding this meeting to discuss the proposal. UGB expansion proposal before you today is really a significant step for our city in developing both a safe and vibrant neighborhood. And the expanded UGB will provide our residents with a number of benefits. First of all, it will provide consistency with our existing transportation system plan, as you saw on the map. Secondly, it will provide that second means of ingress and egress for the new 100 lot subdivision known as Bailey Meadows, as well as 160 houses in the existing Nicholas Glen subdivision. This is really needed for safety connection to 211, and the city will be working with ODOT to provide the proper infrastructure at that intersection. The park plan that will be provided will provide us with additional outdoor recreational opportunities needed in that area. So we would appreciate your vote towards approving this today. And I thank you for your time this morning. Hope to see you again in the near future.
Any questions of Jan? Seeing none. Any other people wishing to testify?
Yes, we have Kelly O'Neill Jr.
Okay. Kelly, unmute yourself. Go ahead, Kelly.
Okay, I am, good morning, commissioners, and thank you for your time. I'm the Development Services Director with the City of Sandy, 39250 Pioneer Boulevard, Sandy, Oregon, 97055. I'm not going to take much of your time here, but I just really wanted to thank Glenn and Jennifer with Clackamas County Planning for being so helpful and thoughtful. Glenn's presentation this morning was spot on. He nailed it. You know, the only other two things I want to touch on is I think it was already covered by Glenn and AKS. This has been unanimously recommended by both planning commissions and also unanimously by the City Council of Sandy. And the only other thing I'd like to say is that when I brought the UGB expansion before you, I think 3 years ago, where we expanded 600 acres, I really wish the TSP map would have been less conceptual and more specifically locating Gunderson Road through engineering analysis, because we would have saved everybody the trouble of coming back before you this morning for another expansion. So we're going to be very cognizant of that with future TSP approvals, that we look at those a little bit closer than just conceptual alignments, so that hopefully we avoid this in the future. With that, I thank you, and I would like for you guys to consider this today and approve it. Thank you.
Any questions of Kelly? Well, until you got on, I was going to support this, but now I'm not. Paul.
Yeah, I do have just one question. I gather when this road extension is built, it'll be, the cost will be borne by either the developer and or the city, and it'll be a city a facility?
Yes, correct. The Gunderson Road extension will be constructed by the developer. The Highway 211 improvements will be a city road construction project, and all the costs will be borne by the city or the developer.
Okay. Chair, I'm prepared to make a motion.
Well, first, let me close the public hearing. Is there anyone else, Mary?
No, there's no one else.
All right, so we'll close the public hearing and move to deliberation, and I'd call for a motion.
Chair, I move to approve approve Z004-20-CP with the following modifications. Oh, I'm sorry, read the wrong one. I move to approve Z004-20-CP as recommended by staff.
Second.
Okay, so it's been moved to approve Z0004-20-CP as recommended by staff. Any further discussion? All right, let me make sure I do this right. All right, so Mary, will you please take a roll?
Yes. Commissioner Fisher.
Aye.
Commissioner Humberston.
Aye.
Commissioner Savas.
Aye.
Commissioner Schrader.
Aye.
And Chair Bernard.
Aye. Motion carries unanimously. Now that the requests have been approved, I'll direct staff to draft an ordinance reflecting today's decision and include it on the agenda of the board's next meeting for adoption, or a future meeting for adoption. Let me see. And with that, we will close the hearing on Z004-20-CP and adjourn the meeting. Now, we've got another one right after this, so we'll go ahead and adjourn that one, and I will open the next one.
Actually, Chair Bernard.
Yes.
We've noticed the next hearing for 10:30, and so we need to take a short break.
Okay.
Yeah.
Short break. All right. See you
We'll
at
be back at
10:30.
10.
Thank you, everybody.